meeting. All right, we're going to get started. Looks like we've leveled out at just over 25 folks. Really excited about today's meeting of the Hydrogen Working Group. It's great to see everyone. We always start with introductions of new faces or people who just perhaps haven't introduced themselves before for whatever reason. This is a friendly group, so I encourage you, if you are new, to please pop on, turn your video on, turn your audio on, let us know who you are, and then please put your contact information in the chat. So let's see here. Would someone like to go first? Daryl Brown, are you, I think you're new to us here, is that correct?
Correct. My first time to join. Chris Peterson invited me. I work with Chris at the BIA Division of Energy and Mineral Development. I work in the renewables group and lead the hydrogen team. So we work with all the Indian tribes and Alaska Native villages. We sponsor 2 grant programs and so forth. So very interested in hydrogen development. Excellent.
I would love to know more about what the hydrogen team at BIA entails. How many of you are there?
Currently, there's about 10 of us across different branches. So we have like Chris, you know, in the fluids group. We have some mechanical engineers. We have, you know, several people out of renewables group, as well as in the mapping group, and so we collaborate on, you know, any potential projects that are out there. You know, we sponsor 2 grant programs, and so we've awarded 1 grant to an Indian tribe to do a feasibility study for hydrogen development.
Okay. Can you say more about that grant and
no?
Okay. All right. I thought I would at least poke or prod. There's some follow-up information probably to have there. Thank you, Daryl. Appreciate you being on the call here. Christine, did you want to jump in as well?
Yeah, I work with Daryl and I'm on the hydrogen team, and I'm working with another geologist, and we're looking for areas that might be favorable for natural hydrogen.
That's great. That is an interest. I know of the ARPA-E office within the Department of Energy, Geologic Hydrogen. So it would be great to follow up with you and talk to you about maybe what you could share with the group at one of our monthly meetings. So thanks for joining us. And Christine, please put your contact info into the chat.
Okay.
And so people can follow up with you for more discussions. All right. Other folks who are new to the crew or who haven't introduced themselves before, please let us know who you are and maybe a fun fact.
I can jump in there. My name is Harry Prinsloo. I'm based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, engineer by training. I co-founded a company about a year ago called Oryx Energy. We've got a group of mechanical, process, and controls engineers who do most of our consulting work on hydrogen projects. Currently, we're working on one in Sonoma, an off-grid microgrid, with a small seasonal storage microgrid installation going in hopefully early next year. Like I said, we mostly do consulting work, but we also help companies with technology commercialization. One of the co-founders has a strong background in that. I ended up in this group because I attended the governor's conference earlier this year on invitation from Alaska Unlimited, a nonprofit group from Alaska owned by Native Alaskans. That was done mostly through humanitarian work that I'm involved in with IEEE Smart Village, who is more of a funding organization, or acts more like a funding organization in that capacity. Obviously, they're a very technical group, but they provide project funding for, especially in the early stages, for projects that are typically unlikely to get funded. There's a template for what those projects should look like, and we typically look for community impact as one of the major drivers.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining us today. And please put your name and contact info in the chat so we can follow up with you for future meetings and so other folks can have conversations with you as interests intersect. Do we have any, but thank you again. Do we have anyone else new on the call who would like to introduce themselves? Let's see here. Before we open it up to another introduction, I think we're going to have to take off the AI assistant. Patty, can you explain the university's policy there, please?
Yeah. We're just erring on the safe side and not allowing AI assistance on our Zoom meetings that we're recording right now. But happy to share any notes if anyone wants follow-up notes from myself. Thanks.
To do something with the Launch Alaska assistant. And then I also saw Eva White, Launch Alaska's Climate Tech Fellow. Have you introduced yourself before on one of our meetings? And if not, could you do so, please?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Eva. I'm the Climate Technology Fellow for Launch Alaska this year. And I'm here on behalf of Tim Leach, who's at a conference right now. And so I'm here to take notes. Yep.
Terrific. Excellent. All right. Do we have more folks on the call? Looks like we have a guest from ATCA on the call. I think I might know who it is, but it would be great if you could introduce yourself.
My name's Andy. I'm the project planner for the native village of Atka. I just started working about 8 months ago with the company. So I'm learning the process and learning the invites and conference meetings with different companies. I'm pretty new to this.
Perfect. And I think I talked with your city manager at the infrastructure workshop last week in Anchorage. Thank you for joining us. And I didn't catch your name, your first name. Can you say that again, please?
Name's Andy.
Andy, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. And do you have a email address you can put in the chat to share with us?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. All right. How about any other introductions from new faces? Any new folks on the call? Okay. Going once, going twice. Call it good. All right. This is where the time in the meeting where we've typically had some committee updates. We effectively closed out the EV Road Rally Committee, and I don't think there is too much to report on the methane discussions, although JR, let me just check with you to see if there's anything there that's new.
No, I mean, I think you probably know we had a conversation kind of going with EPA that's just gone a little bit quiet. So trying to figure out how to get things re-engaged on that front while also reviewing the possible technologies that exist for converting existing engines, because it seems from a regulatory perspective, we'll probably have a much easier lift taking an existing engine and applying some kind of a kit to it to make it a methanol engine than actually being able to legally import and use a purpose-built methanol, or for that matter, hydrogen or ammonia or whatever engine. And then, we're also trying to figure out what, if EPA can't get out of their own way, like who is it that can even help EPA to figure out how to do things? Because clearly, if we don't allow people to have engines that burn alternative fuels, we're kind of diminishing a lot of any of the potential effectiveness of any of these hydrogen fuel generation programs.
Yes, thank you. And I believe I owe you a response to your email too, so I will get on that. I see that Cord has his hand up. I know Cord's got some exciting news to share with us. So Cord, why don't you take the floor and let us know what's going on in your corner of the world?
Sure. So I'm Cord Christensen. I'm the generation system manager here in Sitka. We have 2 hydroelectric projects, combined capacity of about 33 megawatts, and we're 100% plus renewable. We recently received an award from NREL for their 3-year in-depth technical partnership. Other communities that were selected were Chicago, Colorado Springs, and Pittsburgh. So we're, I think, punching above our weight. Our key focus was how do we get to full renewable utilization, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then how do we get to full decarbonized export? Were kind of our two key objectives. As I said, we're if you treat 100% of the electrical power, meaning normal electric power, lights, motors, all the normal sorts of things, we supply all of that with our hydro. We also have about 3.5 megawatts of interruptible boilers in schools and municipal buildings around town that we as the electric department own, maintain, turn on, turn off. You have to have a fuel oil boiler to be able to apply for the electrical rate or interruptible rate. And granted, it's on most of the time, but we shut the systems down when we're reaching a peak, be it in the morning and the evening from time to time. More often than not, if we're doing maintenance on one of the 2 hydro units and we have half our capacity, then we want those interruptible boilers off the system so that we can continue to run on 100% hydro without having to turn on diesels to make up the balance. And okay, occasionally if there's a drunk or somebody that hits a power pole, or we have a rotten transmission line power pole and we have to replace it, yes, we do have to run our diesels. But just an interesting number is that for every kW that we generate with our emergency diesels, we consume 5 kW over the course of the year, just keeping it in a hot standby. So if you put that together, we're 100% plus renewable hydro energy for our normal power. But the bad news is that we're operating at about 67% utilization of our generation assets. Typical rainfall is about 86 inches. A low water year might be 50 and a high water year might be 125. So it varies. And we have about 4 months of energy storage in our 2 water reservoirs. But we would like to do something with that excess power. We're islanded. We have no ability to transmit power to another utility. We have no pipelines. The only way to get to Sitka is by boat or by plane. So one of the things we're looking at is, can we produce a decarbonized fuel by electrolyzing water? We can mine nitrogen out of the air, combine the 2 together and make ammonia. And okay, ammonia is a hydrogen carrier. It sounds better as hydrogen than it does ammonia. That stinks, that smells, all these problems. But the challenge with hydrogen, if you are not on a pipeline and you can't use it right away, is that it's a squirrely beast, in my opinion. If you liquefy it, you have a boil-off rate, depending upon what your system is, of 1 to 5% per day. And what does that mean? Well, even at 1%, it means that if whatever energy you put into a tank, by the end of 30 days, you've lost a quarter of it because you've expended that much energy to recompress it and liquefy it and get it back in the tank. And by 60 days, you've lost half. And pretty soon you get to zero. And for most remote communities, really what you need is some seasonal storage, either because as they say, when the sun shines, you need to utilize everything you can. When it doesn't shine, that's when you want to use it. So for the Arctic, for Alaska, any rural areas, you may want 6 months or more. In addition, ammonia can be used in other things, internal combustion engines, furnaces, still very much under development, but there are some farmers in Iowa, Manitoba, who have converted their tractors and combines to some sort of ammonia and hydrogen system. There are manufacturers that have fuel cells that can run on straight ammonia. Sitka happens to be 1,000 miles closer to Japan than LA. Sitka also had the first Japanese investment in the US after World War II for most favored trade status. That was for a pulp mill. Alaska is used to exporting our resources. And anyway, we hope that with the collaboration with NREL and Pacific Northwest National Labs, that we will understand the economics of how do we get to 100% utilization and 100% decarbonization and export over the next few years.
Thank you, Cord. We're going to be following that project closely. Really excited for you and the community of Sitka to see what you can do with this award and this funding. So congrats. And I guess this means the work is just starting. It looks like JR has his hand up. JR, do you have a question?
Just a I wasn't I thought I just mentioned, the obviously, you've got ammonia, methanol is the other way you can, turn hydrogen into a stable carrier fuel. And so, given Sitka's position, because the methanol, and particularly green methanol, is in huge demand as a marine fuel these days, that I just wanted to flag that if it wasn't on your radar already, as it was what could be an interesting opportunity for Sitka, particularly when they've got that low carbon, no carbon, ferry program out there. So the Marine Highway could, potentially get a boat that would burn a hydrogen carrier like methanol in there, which obviously Sitka would be a pretty bomber refueling station for.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for that. And I should say, yes, whether it is ammonia, methanol, SAF as a synthetic aviation fuel or sustainable aviation fuel. And I see that there's someone from Guam looking at getting hydrogen out of garbage. I think that really it's carbon out of garbage for all the methanol, SAF, other types of fuel. But again, with an isolated community, our garbage gets compacted, stuffed into a container, goes 1,000 miles south by barge to Seattle, then gets loaded on a train to Eastern Washington where it's landfilled. I don't think that's very sustainable. So I think that we'll be looking at kind of the wide range of what can we do generating hydrogen, combining it with other resources that you can find in an isolated community, do something with it that makes some money. Ultimately, as a utility, what we're looking to do is create some revenue, because that then helps stabilize the normal cost of power for everyone in the community.
Thank you. Thank you. Mike Kraft, looks like you have your hand up, and I think this might be your first time joining our monthly meetings. So for the benefit of everyone, could you also introduce yourself, please?
Actually, it's my third time. My name is Mike Kraft. I own the Delta Wind Farm in Delta Junction, Alaska, and am working on some other projects around the state. Some of them involving hydrogen. And I had a question, Cord. Have you looked at the metal hydrate containers for hydrogen as an option for storing hydrogen? I was reading some material out of Australia, and they were talking about being able to store hydrogen at 1 atmosphere at ambient temperature for long periods of time in extremely heavy containers that basically have minute pieces of metal in them, where they put the hydrogen into that tank with the metal in it, and it bonds, and then they use a temperature differential to get it back out. That seems like a pretty stable way to store hydrogen. I was just curious if you had been aware of that.
I've read about it. I haven't really looked too far into it. One of our challenges, again, kind of economies of scale, and ultimately we have, well, for the last few years, we've maybe used 20,000 gallons of diesel typically per year, but we have 20 megawatts of diesel generation. One of the things we're looking at is and 7 megawatts of that is 1960s vintage iron, where you have 12 to 18 month delivery times on spare parts because the manufacturers are no longer in business. So what's the next generation of engines to or fuel cells or whatever to generate emergency power when we need it? But the other is that ultimately we will be able to produce far more, I'll say, decarbonized fuel or commodity than we have local consumption capacity to absorb. And so we need some sort of local storage, and then also a capability to export. I think as JR mentioned, yes, there's the ferry, there are cruise ships. All of them are looking at alternative fuels as well. There's the Coast Guard, there's Alaska Airlines, all looking for alternative aviation fuels. We have a reasonable mix of off-takers. It's a question of, as a municipality, can we make a little bit of money with some degree of certainty? Hopefully with the assistance of some grants, we'll start to find out. And then what's the appropriate scale for a rural community of 600? As of, for instance, what might work for them. So we'll be learning a lot more about smaller systems, but even so, with 25 to 50 gigawatt hours a year, that's still small potatoes for something in the lower 48, but maybe right size for regional hubs elsewhere in Alaska.
Okay. And I think we could talk about this for quite a bit longer. And I saw that Masha had her hand up and probably wanted to chime in about metal hydride storage. There's probably a lot to say there. I know that NREL is doing some pilot demonstrations with metal hydride storage. Masha, if you wanted to make a quick comment right now, we could do that, but I also don't want to take too much time away from the presentation you're about to give as well.
That's precisely right, Erin. I just wanted to chime about this. NREL is installing a 520 kilogram of hydrogen metal hydride storage. So probably some insights from this project could be shared if that represents an interest.
Yes, and I think that Masha might have some fingerprints on the Sitka project too. So there's probably follow-on conversations to have there. But thank you so much, Cord, for giving us that update, and congratulations. We'll look forward to hearing how it goes and really seeing what you can figure out, that could be replicable for other parts of the state. So really happy for your news.
Thank you.
Other updates, either we heard from JR. I don't think there's much going on, at least in the Iceland conversations, at least with regard to hydrogen. The EV road rally is essentially tabled for now, which leaves our other subcommittee, which is the subject of today's meeting presentation, which is the development of the hydrogen roadmap, as we were originally calling it. So just to bring everyone up to speed, this spring we had several group brainstorming sessions where we invited members of the working group to develop content around the different parts of the hydrogen ecosystem. So everything from production to storage to delivery to distribution to end use applications. And they were excellent sessions, at least in my opinion, and we generated a lot of material. And then a small group of us, myself, Levi Kilcher, Masha Koleva, and Jeff Ron have been taking that material and adding some technical analysis to it, and now have a draft report, which we are calling the Alaska Hydrogen Opportunities Report, because we are not espousing one particular path for the state, but rather a number of different possibilities for the state, so opportunities. And Masha is going to give a presentation about the opportunities report today, and then we will follow that up by sending out a copy of the report to all the working group members after today's meeting. We wanted to get a presentation today to sort of frame that delivery. And then we will be asking for your comments. And we would like to ask that you send your written comments to Patty. And we will share that address if you don't already have it at the end of the presentation or in the email that we send the report out in. I want to emphasize that this is a draft report and it's probably missing some things, and it probably doesn't have everything perfectly right. So this is where we are inviting your constructive comments and ways to make it bigger. This is better rather than not bigger. This is an iterative process. It is, again, just a draft. And so we just ask that you approach it in that fashion so that we can make it the best product that it can be. So with that, I am going to hand this over to Masha, and thank you, Masha, for being the spokesperson for this team effort. And we really appreciate you packaging this all up to present to the crew today. And hopefully we'll have a bit of discussion today and even more discussion in subsequent meetings and even breakout subcommittee meetings if we need to go there. So Masha, please take it away and feel free to fill in anything I have forgotten to say.
Thank you, Erin. I think this was an excellent setting up the stage for this presentation. First of all, I would like to make sure that everyone can see my screen and everyone can hear me well.
Yes, looks good.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I also hope that I don't bore the audience because this is my second time in a row presenting. So if you have any complaints about that, please send them to Patty. This is a joke. Don't send anything. So on Alaska Hydrogen Opportunities Report, going straight into what this report contains. Essentially starting with an executive summary. This is a very typical way of starting these reports, and an overview. The overview includes what the report is targeting, so essentially the objectives, what targets the US government has set for emission decreasing, just essentially setting up the stage for that report. And then the next section is on background. So why hydrogen, why now, and why in Alaska? So this gives a little bit of an overview of of hydrogen globally or hydrogen in a very generic terms. It includes also sort of 101 hydrogen. Then we break the following sections into the various components of the supply chain for hydrogen. So that is the energy production and use, the hydrogen production potential and derivatives, the hydrogen storage, transmission and distribution potential, and the potential for hydrogen markets and end-use applications, everything within statewide, essentially within the state of Alaska. Then we move to reducing Alaska's greenhouse gas emissions using hydrogen. So we explore different scenarios about that, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And then we talk about factors that affect the hydrogen opportunities in Alaska. So going from regulation and policy, the technology aspects, the infrastructure, what financial investments are going to be needed, workforce development, and society and equity considerations. All of these, and with the help of all of these, essentially hydrogen strategy and roadmap for Alaska could be the next step. The hydrogen opportunities reports is rested on the U.S. National Clean Hydrogen Strategy and Roadmap takeaways, and it extends further the analysis to the state of Alaska. So the goals of the report are to enhance the knowledge and the information sharing about the various hydrogen components specific to Alaska, and then identify potential opportunities and the challenges associated with any hydrogen innovation and investments for the production, deployment of hydrogen systems. And not only within the state, actually, this is something that could be informative for the entire nation, if you will. Then we identify key opportunities across the state. So these are related to the economic investment, workforce development, and doing that through increased and equitable employment in trades, clean technology, and energy services. On the background side, I assume that most of you are aware of the hydrogen at scale concept, or what is called the Swiss Army knife, essentially, of hydrogen. So hydrogen at scale concept says that hydrogen could be impactful at the scale. Because it has various ways of being of using energy to be produced, and various end uses. So on the left, having the sources that could be used, so renewables, nuclear, fossil fuels with carbon capture and sequestration, and then these all could be fed into the electric grid infrastructure, or it could be that they are absolutely distributed, off grid, or centralized and off grid for that matter. So hydrogen generation could stabilize the grid, especially given a high penetration of renewables, and then it storage, seasonal storage, long duration energy storage can help with that. And also other conventional storage could be used to kind of flatten the renewable profile, for example, that is powering the hydrogen system, if we talk about electrolysis. Then hydrogen could be used, this is on the right hand side, in various sections: transportation, synthetic fuels, biomass, ammonia, methanol was mentioned, metals production, different other chemicals and industry processes, like, for example, the food industry, and for heat, especially high-grade heat. Now, I must mention here that this is an overview of the entire potential of hydrogen. And depending on the location, some end uses could be more beneficial, or they could make more sense to be applied for a certain geographic area. And I will talk about the specific end uses that we identified in the opportunities report for Alaska in the following sections, in the following slides. So a bit more of background, and this is on many countries, like approximately 50 economies. They released in the last few years reports that were related to their hydrogen strategies, including the United States. Like I mentioned, the US National Clean Hydrogen Strategy and Roadmap was one of them. So here and in the report, we identified key countries with their roadmaps and what hydrogen demand they are targeting for 2030 in million metric tons. This is what you see reported in the second column. And in the first column, the countries that we selected. These are going to be big players for hydrogen, building hydrogen economy: Germany, Japan, South Korea, United States, United Kingdom, Chile, and many more. I don't want to discount any of them. But what we found interesting is that these reports actually, or many of them, identified net importing or net exporting hydrogen. So they say, oh, we need that much hydrogen to be exported, or we need that much hydrogen to be imported to meet the targeted hydrogen demand that we want by that time frame, 2030. So for Germany, so they say hydrogen demand by 2030, and it's really low. This is what is produced in the country, but then they are also planning for importing hydrogen. So that is in addition. And in the third column, when you see a minus, this indicates that the country needs has identified that they need imports, and the amount of the imports that is identified in the roadmaps. And then plus sign indicates that the country is planning on exporting hydrogen. And the net exporters are United States and Chile relying a lot on their renewable energy. United Kingdom does not mention explicitly on what they are planning to do. It seems like they will be self-sufficient. So opportunities for hydrogen exports apply for Germany, Japan, South Korea, where potentially Alaska could play some role. And the next, moving to the energy consumption in Alaska, so specific for Alaska, the data for this Sankey diagram was obtained from EIA for 2021. So you can see the numbers in trillion BTU. And on the left, you can see the various sources of energy from where the state gets its energy from. And on the right-hand side, you can see various buckets where this energy is used. So the biggest portion comes from petroleum, and most of it is exported. And the second big portion of the petroleum is actually used in transportation. And then the third is used in heating. Natural gas is used predominantly for heating and for some electric power as well, where we include as well the field consumption, which is the injection back into the fields. Then biomass, geothermal, solar, coal, hydro, and wind also are part of the heat and predominantly the electric power mix. We then differentiate between residential, commercial, and industrial heat, and rural, like within the rail belt, and rural heat. So what does this tell us? This tells us where potentially how much essentially is going to be needed to decarbonize various sections. Last time I presented this a version of this slide. So what this is telling us is that the potential of clean hydrogen production. The map essentially is showing the potential from marine energy resources. So this is offshore wind, wave, and tidal energy, where the predominant portion is coming from offshore wind. And we estimate that the maximum technical potential would be around 300 million metric tons from marine energy resources. And like I mentioned last time, this is 6 times more than what is targeted in the US clean hydrogen strategy and roadmap for 2050. So that this 50 million metric tons of hydrogen are targeted. But we also identify in the report that the maximum would very unlikely be achieved, so to say. We just report the potential, and this is a big thing to consider. So we estimate that actually achievable potential is like around like a percentage really of this, so 90 to 180 million metric tons of hydrogen, which is still a lot. And then we identify the natural gas resources in the state, and we say if all of the natural gas resources were used for producing hydrogen from natural gas through steam methane reforming, we would be able to produce more than 700 million metric tons of hydrogen. This is all per year, I must say. And also, again, like this is the maximum that could be achieved. It doesn't mean that it's going to be done. It's just an assessment of the potential of the resources and how they can be used. The next thing, as part of the big part of the infrastructure that we already know, like me as a hydrogen analyst doing techno-economic analysis, hydrogen storage plays a huge role in unlocking the hydrogen potential because it represents a big portion of the levelized cost of hydrogen, and unlocking potential for low cost hydrogen storage could essentially benefit a lot the economics. The figure that you see is the sedimentary basin carbon dioxide sequestration potential in the state. And here I must thank David Clark for providing this image. Also, another thing that we noticed in developing the report is that there is a lot of assessment that has been done for carbon dioxide sequestration potential. There is not much that is done on hydrogen sequestration potential. So the assumptions that went into estimating like the maximum hydrogen storage potential is around 550 million metric tons, based only on the North Slope's total oil and gas storage potential, is coming from just having an estimate of the reserves that are available. And based on the amount of reserves, we estimated how much that would equate to hydrogen storage. And like I said, this is only within the North Slope, and probably larger for when we include the entire state. Now, for carbon dioxide, this is a huge potential. So it could mean a lot of things. It could mean that it could store say low carbon hydrogen from steam methane reforming, or it could mean as well that Alaska could potentially export some CO2 and sequester it in Alaska. But these numbers are essentially coming from so the resource that is the resource potential that is in the North Slope. So 270,000 million metric tons of carbon dioxide that could be sequestered in the North Slope. 1,500 million metric tons of carbon dioxide in the Kennedy Basin. And in the Lower Cook Inlet, the number is 4,330 million metric tons of CO2. So this is in oil, and so this is in coal seam oil and gas reservoirs, but carbon dioxide could be also stored in saline aquifer sandstones. So the potential in the Cook Inlet is around 19,000 million metric tons. Sorry, excuse me. That is in coal seams. And in saline aquifer sandstones, this would be 900,000 million metric tons of CO2 in the Gulf of Alaska. It doesn't mean that it will be accessible. This is just providing some insights on the numbers. Now, potential for hydrogen markets and end use applications. Last time we touched based on some of those, but what we included in the report is covering the majority of what I presented as part of the H2 at scale concept and the Swiss Army knife, and then making very rough assumptions on what portion hydrogen could play in the various sectors. So starting from transportation, here the hexagons are the different end-use applications, and then next to them we report the hydrogen that sector would potentially need. Wherever we could, we provided a range, because this is essentially representing the assumptions that were made. So starting from transportation, that is divided into medium and heavy duty fuel cell electric vehicles, into sustainable aviation fuels for aviation, and into shipping for ships. So starting with the medium and heavy duty vehicles, based on the U.S. National Clean Hydrogen Strategy and Roadmap, medium and heavy duty vehicles are more likely to play a role into the future than light duty fuel cell electric vehicles. Research has shown that actually fuel cell electric vehicles that are light duty vehicles would not be competitive with battery electric. But that is different when it comes to medium and heavy duty vehicles. So based on Alaska's numbers, 5% of the transportation sector is represented by the medium and heavy duty vehicles in Alaska. Assuming that 2% of the fuel cell electric vehicles, 2% by 2030 and 17% by 2050 would be a shared market of the fuel cell electric vehicles that are medium and heavy duty, that would result in 2 to 14 kilotons of hydrogen. For the sustainable for sustainable aviation fuels, we assume that number, we arrive at the 0.4 million metric tons of hydrogen based on 2 million gallons per day of kerosene that is currently needed. And 0.01 to 0.37 million metric tons of hydrogen for shipping is based on the Aleutian Islands report and 3 scenarios that they look at. For heat, we know that hydrogen could play a role in high-grade heat, especially in industrial applications. So if we assume that there is a blending with natural gas in 5 to 20%, that could represent 0.16 to 0.64 million metric tons of hydrogen. And this is seen as a transition to completely decarbonized heating. So it's a transition. It's a transition say number. Then the next is industry. Industry is represented by ammonia, and that number is coming from the equivalent that is needed, 0.34 million metric tons of hydrogen, equivalent that is needed for the ammonia plant that has been mothballed, and what essentially would be needed for it to come back online. For power is a tricky animal. Because here we need to estimate the different loads that occur at various locations. So so that would be seasonal storage, where hydrogen could play a role, seasonal, long duration. So that would also depend on the renewable energy profiles, and further analysis would be required to estimate even a ballpark number of what storage would be needed in various points, locations in Alaska. For exports, based on the various roadmaps that I discussed earlier, this would be less than 3 million metric tons of hydrogen. But essentially, this is to say that the export market potential is huge. And although we have these ballpark numbers, in-depth qualitative and quantitative research is really needed for further informing the public, so to say. So that could be a next step for the hydrogen roadmap strategy for Alaska. We identified 3 pathways for greenhouse gas emission reductions for Alaska. These are based on the Biden's administration goals of 50% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2030 across all industry sectors, 100% carbon-free electricity by 2035, and net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And it is very likely that all these targets are met with a diversified portfolio of solutions. However, for the sake of giving some insight and putting things into context of how much each of these milestones for the country, and therefore for Alaska, would translate into hydrogen, here we assume that these goals, what will happen if these goals are all met by hydrogen for Alaska? So that would mean around 0.4 million metric tons of hydrogen for 50% greenhouse gas reduction. More than 2 kilotons of hydrogen-based hydrogen that is based on the current electricity demands and renewable generation profiles. This is assuming a week of storage. And around 2.8 million metric tons of hydrogen would be needed for to decarbonize 100% of the emissions. Now, these numbers would definitely require some refining, but these are our ballpark numbers that we report. On the various insights for the identifying opportunities, and starting with the various regulation and policy, we divide them into state, federal, and private, and these are just things that could be done in that area. Like some of them would include modify the power cost equalization program, expand the regulatory commission of Alaska, on a federal basis, leveraging the various tax and credit systems would be extremely beneficial, revising and implementing new fuel standards, and investing heavily in research development and deployment of CO2 injection, but not only, hydrogen injection as well, hydrogen production too. Also for private, different collaborations with organizations like First Movers Coalition, lobbying for tax credit program enhancement, or even extensions, develop mass market solutions for rural remote locations. And on the technology and infrastructure, we have, again, state, federal, and private. And we define, say, for the state, develop techno-economic analysis for Alaska price targets and techno-economic analysis for hydrogen production in various locations, considering various power mixes and various application would also be important. Study the feasibility of hydrogen research, for example. For federal, some of those could include defining the water needs and criteria, evaluating the hydrogen as a fuel versus electric heat, also prove geologic storage and withdrawal, and so on and so forth. For the private, we identify some of those being quantified potential for ESMR for North Slope natural gas. Identify conditions needed to establish a hydrogen hub in terms of, again, resources and use applications. For the financial investment and the workforce development, essentially what is needed is enable low carbon, low cost electricity statewide. This is the levelized cost of electricity is a huge driver in levelized cost of hydrogen. Assess the need for the state incentive. So once there is this insight of how much would actually the hydrogen cost optimizing the entire supply chain, then the incentives for the state could be identified, like we need that much in order for hydrogen to be competitive. Then evaluate economic potential for new industry. So in order to achieve affordable hydrogen, electrolyzer costs need to go down, renewable costs need to go down. The hydrogen and carbon dioxide storage markets need to be enabled to support that transition. Also, utilizing any byproducts in the supply chains could increase the revenue and therefore decrease the levelized cost of hydrogen. Different private options could be implemented, assess timeline requirements for offtake agreements, identify storage use thresholds that fit specifically for Alaska, and so on and so on. On the workforce development, establishing monitoring and permitting and compliance programs and support rural training and development were identified in the report. For the state-wide programs, also establish process safety programs for federal and for private, various, like develop pipeline for construction workforce, establish operator and technician training programs, essentially a lot on training and developing experts into the field, and especially safety considerations. For equity inclusion being a big part. So we acknowledge the fact that there has to be support for rural Alaska, in addition to rail belt, establish the power cost equalization incentives for renewable energies and for hydrogen. Guide communities how to use safely and equitably the storage solutions, consult indigenous group, make sure that people are informed of the technologies, of the risks of the technologies, how to mitigate, how to maintain, and so on and so forth. So what's next for Alaska's hydrogen future? 3 big areas to develop an Alaska hydrogen strategy and roadmap. So that could be based on this milestone of having this hydrogen opportunities report. where like in the strategy and roadmap evaluation policies opportunities could be one thing to consider, creating a database with planned clean hydrogen projects in Alaska. So that would enable connecting of off-takers, producers, stakeholders, essentially creating a network of flow of information and possibly collaborations. Align Alaska's energy goals and strategic assets in meeting global market demand. And then the second big item is the begin demonstration. Demonstration is key in collecting data, analyzing, and then turning the demonstration into big scale projects. So this would be supporting feasibility studies and pilot project demonstrations at various scales, not only in the rail belt, but also in rural Alaska. Creating a pipeline ecosystem for demonstration projects to establish the proof of concept, identify sites where demonstration projects and consequential large-scale projects would be deployable, use demonstration projects to create hand-on workforce development programs as well. So with that, advancing the state level programs required to support key elements of the clean hydrogen value chain, which would include renewable electrolytic hydrogen production, as well as steam methane reforming with carbon capture and storage. So these are our next steps identified in that section. And with that, I hope I did not take super much time. Let's open it for discussion. But before that, you'll be mailed a copy of the report. So please go through it, submit your written comments to Patty by the 31st of October. We are very much looking forward to your feedback, to your comments on how to improve the report, how to make it of better quality, and how to make it useful to stakeholders, to you, to everyone who is going to read that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Masha. That was quite a lot of material to get over and get across. I want to reiterate, we would like your comments by the end of the month, and depending on the types of comments and the volume of comments, we may dedicate the next meeting to presenting a readout of those comments and ways that the report will be modified or improved. So with that, if you have questions, this is a great time to ask them, knowing that we will be sending out a copy of the report for you to chew on at a more leisurely pace over the next several weeks. So questions from anyone, or even just impressions or comments or words of encouragement?
I'll step into the breach just to say I was very thankful for how comprehensive this was. I'm still sort of going through it, but it's a really, thoughtful take on the potential. And so I just wanted to say thank you for the hard work that went into it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we tried to be as inclusive as possible of the different sources and opportunities out there. Looks like everyone is stunned into silence. Mike, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm curious if we're involved in a couple of projects that are going to involve hydrogen. This is our company that we're currently working on, and one of the problems that we are encountering is it seems like all of this is very speculative at this point in the financial sector with respect to private capital. And I'm just curious if there's any attempts at all to try and firm up the opportunities to work with capital to kick some of these projects off that might help the private sector overcome some of the speculation that's out there involving hydrogen production.
So when you say, thank you, Mike, first of all, when you say firm up, I think you said the financial opportunities, what kind of specific information are you looking for?
Well, I think, like, for example, with the wind project we're working on, there's a lot of capital out there and people understand wind now. And there's a lot of investor groups out there that want to be part of that program of investing in wind, especially now that we're actually are getting interest from the local utilities as being off-takers for that power. But when you start talking about producing ammonia or hydrogen, the room goes silent. And so it's very difficult at this point to find venture capital for, whether you're going to use an electrolyzer, whether you're going to take it out with steam, whether you're going to take it from gas. It almost doesn't really matter. There's just a lot of nervousness out there in the private sector with respect to investing in these types of projects involving hydrogen production. We see the opportunities, we see the mechanisms to do it. It's just a matter of the tire meeting the road with the capital to kick off a project.
Okay. So I think what you're asking for is maybe, what their price points or parameters or insights from potential capital investors. And I'm not, yeah.
Well, you have a lot of tax credits out there right now, but you've got to have that capital out front before those tax credits mean anything.
Right.
And so, if you want to drill an exploratory well, for example, to do something with CO2 sequestration and extraction of hydrogen from coal methane gases, that's pretty scary stuff for people that are in the investor market. They are less than excited about it. I guess, which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. So it's been the one place where in the private sector, we have run up against a wall. There's a wall there.
Looks like Jeff has a comment.
Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everyone. Jeff Ron here at EXP, and lucky and happy to be a part of the team that helped pull together this preliminary opportunities report. Mike, really appreciate the question, and it's something that I made concerted effort to bring to this process around connectivity between the technical opportunity and the economic one. So would really appreciate in your review of the report, you provide some specific comments to that effect, and encourage others to do the same in terms of building bridges between the opportunity and economic development in Alaska. So thank you.
Other questions or comments?
I guess I might also chime in here. This is Levi Kilcher. And just say, in my mind, the demonstration projects are really like one of the key pieces of answering those questions is, showing how that it works and how it works and what the economics of it are in Alaska. I'm hoping that some demonstration projects can happen and will be funded, and hopefully that'll give a lot more confidence to the financial sector or to the investors you're talking about, Mike.
Thank you, Levi. Other questions or comments?
Aaron, I was wondering, with your DOE role, if you had any publicly available information. I know it's not impacting Alaska, but with the hydrogen hubs and where those are going in terms of, I think there's 6 that have been down selected. Is there any new publicly available information on how those are progressing?
Nothing that's publicly available. Stay tuned. I'm sorry, I can't give you anything more.
Nope, that's why I said publicly available.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'm just gonna hang in the awkward silence here. We don't have any more comments or questions. We will conclude this part of the meeting. Really appreciate everyone's attention as this was presented. And again, we'll send out this report, ask for comments by the end of the month, and then hopefully be able to synthesize them for everyone at the next hydrogen working group meeting. It's about 1:15 Alaska time here. This is where we open it up for any other announcements for the good of the group. And I should just echo some of the comments I'm seeing in the chat. Thank you, Masha, for presenting that. That's a lot of material to get across, and we're all incredibly grateful. So with that, again, any announcements, questions, anything of interest for the group's discussion?
Aaron, this is Brian. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm working on a project to allow for high-speed transportation from Australia to Guam to Hawaii to Alaska. And I'm realizing that hydrogen for me isn't always the go-to answer. Sometimes it's how do you use hydrogen. So for example, I'm working on some gasification power plants to turn municipal solid waste into energy. I think that might be something interesting for our group members to keep in mind.
Okay. Well, keep us posted as you see developments on that project. Sounds like there's some good stuff. All right, other announcements for the good of the group. All right, then I'm going to give you all 15 minutes of your day back. Thank you so much for joining us. We will have our next monthly meeting at the beginning of November. Patty, are there any, I don't know if we've decided on a date there. Is there anything I'm forgetting here before we close out?
Nope, just as always, we welcome any ideas for presentations if you know of someone or have a topic that you'd like to suggest. And then the first Tuesday of the month has been what we've been doing in the past, and that would be November 7th, but you'll see a calendar invite when that's confirmed.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And we appreciate all of you joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And send in those comments once you get the report. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.